The message buzzed through my phone like a bullet that had just punctured my chest. "We're done." Kyle's words hit with a cruel precision, each letter sending a sharp sting deep into the pit of my stomach. "Get your stuff from the storage unit." I stared at the screen, my eyes unblinking, as the glow from the phone illuminated my face, casting jagged shadows in the hallway of what had once been home. It wasn't just the coldness of his message that rattled me. It was the harsh finality, the simplicity of it. The new lock on the door reflected a mocking light, like some cruel joke. It was all so foreign to me now. What had been ours was no longer mine. Samantha Delaney. I'd heard it in my head 100 times that day, trying to convince myself of who I was. 47 years old, a teacher for 15 years. A woman who had once been a wife, but now, well, now I was nothing. 10 days I had spent sleeping on hospital waiting room chairs, my body aching from the cold, from the plastic cushions that could never hold the weight of what I was enduring. 10 days of hospital food, the kind that stuck to the roof of your mouth like ash. 10 days of sitting by my sister's side as she lay unconscious after emergency surgery, while my own world crumbled, unseen. Kyle, my husband of 15 years. And apparently, 10 days was all it took for him to decide that was enough. I collapsed against the wall, my legs giving way as my breath hitched in the cold hallway air. The security light flickered above, casting twisted shadows across the floor. I scrolled through the rest of Kyle's message with trembling hands, the words seeping through my fingers like sand. "I've moved your things to Unit 23B at Westside Storage. Keys under the mat. I pawned your jewelry. It wasn't worth much anyway. My grandmother's antique locket, my wedding ring, the pearl earrings he had given me on our 10th anniversary. Gone. The car I had saved for years to buy. Sold. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. He'd taken everything." I pressed my palm against the door, the metal cold under my fingertips. The door that had once opened to our life, to our home. All the memories, teaching positions, weekend trips, quiet evenings spent grading papers side by side. Now locked away, behind this door. I couldn't even bring myself to open it. In that hallway, as the silence pressed down on me, something cold and heavy settled in my chest. And with it came a decision. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't call him 100 times or wait outside for him to come back. I wouldn't give him that power. Instead, I typed out a single message. "You'll regret this." Then, with a finality I wasn't sure I had in me, I blocked his number. The storage key was right where he said it would be, under the mat. The drive across town felt endless, the city passing by in a blur of streetlights and half-forgotten memories. Unit 23B was small, dusty, just a few cardboard boxes and garbage bags. My life reduced to less than 100 cubic feet. My books, my clothes, a few broken kitchen utensils. It wasn't enough to even fit the weight of a marriage, of 15 years, of everything I thought I had built. I stayed the night in a cheap motel, just a block from the hospital. The bed was scratchy, the sheets worn thin. The water stains on the ceiling seemed to mock me, but as I lay there, staring up into the shadows, I felt something strange stir inside me. I had nothing left. No husband, no home, no plans, no safety net. But I also had nothing to fear anymore, nothing to lose. Starting over at 47 wasn't something I had planned for, but then life doesn't often ask for our permission. Sometimes the surprise is not a gift wrapped with a bow. Sometimes it's a knife in the back. I met Kyle at a teachers' conference in Sacramento 20 years ago. He taught physical education. I taught art. We bonded over the shared frustrations of budget cuts and administrators who didn't understand the value of creative education. He was charming then, always remembering names, always bringing me coffee in the mornings just the way I liked it. Back then, I thought he'd never abandon me. But life, it seems, is never that simple. Our marriage wasn't perfect. Whose is? We'd been through rough patches before. He'd been withdrawn ever since he didn't get the athletic director position. Spending more time at the gym, less time with me. I suggested therapy, but he brushed it off. We just need time, he'd said. Time. But time had a way of slipping away when you weren't looking. Then Vanessa's appendix ruptured, and I knew I couldn't leave her. She had no one else. Our parents were gone, and she'd never married. I had to be there. I thought Kyle would understand. After all, 15 years of marriage should have meant something. But I was wrong. The morning after I found myself locked out, I sat beside Vanessa's bed, holding her hand, trying to steady my voice. "What happened?" she asked, her voice a strained whisper. Her face was still pale from the surgery. "That absolute bastard," she muttered, fury flashing in her eyes. I surprised myself with how calm I felt. "You need to focus on getting better," I said, my voice steady. "I'll figure this out." I was the one whose life had just shattered, yet somehow, I was the one trying to comfort her. "Where will you go? What will you do?" she asked, worry flashing in her eyes. I squeezed her hand. "I've got some savings. Not much, but enough to rent a small place. And—" I paused, the weight of it all settling into my chest. "I've been thinking about that arts administration program at the university." The future seemed uncertain, but there was a strange comfort in knowing I could still make my own choices. Still take control. And that was a power Kyle would never have over me again. "Maybe it's time I finally applied, Sam." Vanessa's voice cut through the tension in the room, using the nickname from our childhood, the one that still felt like a sliver of light from a time when things weren't so broken. "You don't have to pretend with me. It's okay to fall apart." I didn't look at her, my gaze fixed on the distant Sierra Nevada mountains. Their peaks were dusted with the first snow of the season, cold and untouched. But I didn't want to feel the cold right now. I needed warmth. I needed something to fill the hollow space where Kyle's memory used to be. "I'm not pretending," I said quietly. The words felt like a lie, but I couldn't stop them. "I'm just done wasting time on someone who could throw away 15 years so easily." Later that evening, I found a small studio apartment, just barely within reach of my teacher's salary. It was simple. Nothing but the bare essentials and just enough room for the fragments of my life. I unpacked my few remaining belongings, not expecting much of a revelation, but as I sifted through the boxes, I found something Kyle had overlooked. My portfolio, my work, my digital artwork, saved on an external hard drive. It had been hidden in the back of my closet, forgotten in the chaos of it all. And for the first time since that morning when the locks had been changed, I felt something shift inside me. 3 months later, I received the divorce papers in the mail. Irreconcilable differences. I almost laughed. Irreconcilable differences? No. What had happened couldn't be reduced to some sterile legal term. It wasn't just differences that had torn us apart. It was the devastation of coming home to an empty apartment, locked out of the life I thought I was building. The paperwork listed the assets Kyle had claimed, the things that were once ours, everything of value, the apartment, the furniture, our joint savings, and my retirement fund. half of it gone, according to his lawyer. According to him, I had abandoned the marriage by staying with Vanessa during her health crisis. My hands shook as I sat at my kitchen table. The divorce papers spread out in front of me, but the words blurred. I felt the overwhelming weight of it all pressing down. For a moment, I considered calling Kyle, demanding an explanation. I could fight for what was mine, but then my phone buzzed with a notification, an email from the university. I opened it, my heart skipping a beat. You've been accepted into the Arts Administration program with a partial scholarship. Classes would begin in 6 weeks. It felt like a sign. I could spend years fighting Kyle for material things that no longer mattered, or I could take this opportunity and rebuild. I signed the divorce papers without contest, much to the frustration of the lawyer who had insisted I consult. He's walking away with everything, the attorney warned. You're entitled to much more than this. I know what I'm entitled to, I said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded, and I'll get it back my own way. That night, I called my principal. I resigned. 20 years in the public school system. Finished with a 10-minute conversation that somehow felt like it had stretched for hours. I felt a brief pang of regret for the students I would leave behind, but deep down, I knew this was necessary. I couldn't risk running into Kyle in the faculty lounge. I couldn't teach in a place where people would whisper behind my back about my failed marriage. When I told Vanessa, her response was immediate. You're letting him win, she argued, her tone sharp. That school was your life before him. I stared at her, calm despite the fire in my chest. That's the problem, Van. Everything in this city reminds me of him. The school, our favorite restaurants, the park where we used to walk on Sunday mornings. I need a clean break. And then what? She asked, still unconvinced. I hesitated, then pulled out my hard drive, showing her the digital art portfolio I had been working on over the years. I've been researching art therapy programs. I could use my teaching background and this degree to develop something similar. Digital tools to help people process trauma. Vanessa studied the work, her eyes softening as she looked over the designs I'd created. These are beautiful, Sam. But art therapy programs, they take years to establish, and you need to eat. I smiled faintly. In the meantime, I've applied for a night job at the university library. With the scholarship, I'll manage. I have to try, Van. I need something that's completely mine. As I left her house that evening, the winter sun dipping below the mountain peaks, I felt a stirring within me, something I hadn't felt since that cold morning when I'd found myself locked out. Hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I could build something new. And for the first time in months, I felt a rhythm settling into my life. Days spent in class, nights at the library, and the late hours I spent working on my portfolio. The world had become small again, just me and my future. No room for Kyle, no room for the past, and that was exactly what I needed. 6 months into the program, I found myself standing before Professor Winters, her sharp gaze piercing through me like a cold wind. She was in her 60s, silver hair cascading down her back, and eyes as blue as the sea. Eyes that seemed to see past all of my defenses, straight into the core of me. Your project proposal was exceptional, she said, her tone matter-of-fact, a simple statement that felt more like a challenge than praise. The digital art therapy concept has potential. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, trying desperately to mask how much her approval meant to me. Thank you, I said, my voice steady, though inside, I was a storm of emotions. She continued without pause, handing me a brochure with the ease of someone who had spent decades making others feel small with her brilliance. There's a summer fellowship available through the Carson Foundation. It provides funding for innovative arts initiatives with social impact. The deadline is next week. I suggest you apply tonight. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up until dawn, refining my proposal. Canvas Art Therapy Reimagined. It wasn't just another program. It was a lifeline I had built from the wreckage of my past. A platform designed for people experiencing life-altering events, divorce, bereavement, illness. People who, like me, didn't have the words to express what they were feeling. The ones who needed a canvas, a chance to find their voice again. 2 months later, I held the fellowship in my hands. It wasn't life-changing money, but $15,000 was enough to breathe life into Canvas, enough to build the pilot program that had been waiting for so long. I hired a programmer from the computer science department, spending every free moment I had crafting content, debugging code, making it all come together. By the time I graduated with my master's degree, Canvas was ready for a limited release. We invited 50 participants, cancer patients, individuals who had recently divorced, and people who had lost loved ones. Their feedback flooded in. For the first time, I could express what I was feeling without having to find the words. One participant had written. Another said, "I look forward to my Canvas time every evening." And one more. "It's helping me rebuild myself." I moved into a tiny office downtown with the last of my fellowship funds. It wasn't much, just a desk, a computer, and a view of the city where everything had fallen apart. But it was mine, and it felt like I was finally putting pieces of my life back together. I launched Canvas officially on the 1-year anniversary of the day Kyle had changed the locks. The first month brought in 30 subscribers, the second month 50. By the third month, we had over 100 regular users. It wasn't enough to support me financially yet. I still worked at the university library 4 nights a week. But it was growing. Then came the email that changed everything. My phone buzzed, the notification lighting up my screen. "Miss Delaney, I'm a producer with National Morning. One of our staff members has been using your Canvas program to cope with her mother's cancer diagnosis, and she shared her experience with our team. We are interested in featuring Canvas in our Innovations in Mental Health segment. Would you be available for an interview?" My heart raced as I read the words. National Morning, watched by millions. This kind of exposure could transform Canvas from a struggling startup into a household name. My hands trembled as I immediately dialed Vanessa. "This is it," she said, her voice vibrating with excitement. "This is how you show Kyle what he threw away." I paused, suddenly aware of how little I had thought about Kyle in months. "This isn't about him anymore," I said slowly, the realization settling over me like a wave. "This is about what I've created." And it was true. Somewhere between the late nights, the early mornings, the code reviews, and the content creation, somewhere in the feedback sessions and grant applications, I had stopped defining myself by what I had lost. I had become someone new, someone I was proud to be, someone stronger than the woman who had once wept in the hallway of her old apartment. The day before the interview was scheduled to air, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Janet, a former colleague from the high school art department, stood in the doorway, her presence awkward and hesitant. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said, voice tight. "I saw the promos for your interview tomorrow and, well, I thought you should know, Kyle's been fired." She took a seat across from my desk, clearly uncomfortable with delivering the news. "He's been selling equipment from the athletic department, weights, uniforms, even electronics from the coach's office. The new athletic director found discrepancies in the inventory and started investigating. They discovered receipts from pawn shops all over town." I felt a strange detachment as the words washed over me. How long had it been going on? Over 2 years? She said, hesitating before adding. Apparently, it started small, but recently. She trailed off, unsure how to continue. Things haven't been going well for him since you left. He's been drinking a lot, missing classes. The administration was already on the verge of taking disciplinary action when this came to light. 2 years. That timeline didn't escape me. Kyle's theft had started long before I ever left. Long before Vanessa's emergency or the locked apartment door. It had started when he began to pull away from me, when his indifference turned into something darker. Janet's voice dropped lower. There's more, she added, almost in a whisper. The car. I leaned forward, suddenly aware of the magnitude of what she was about to say. What had once been Kyle's life of comfort and control had unraveled, just like my own. The weight of Janet's words pressed down on me. Your Toyota. The police are investigating the sale. Apparently, Kyle forged your signature on the title transfer. She paused, watching my reaction, but I was numb. The new owner tried to register it, and the DMV flagged it. They're looking into it. I closed my eyes, the loss of that car cutting deeper than I expected. That car had been more than just a vehicle. It was a symbol of my independence, of the years I had worked to earn something just for me. Kyle had taken that too, without my knowledge, without my consent. He had dismantled everything, piece by piece. Will they press charges? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It's a felony, Sam. Title fraud, forgery, they're serious crimes. He could face jail time. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt the satisfaction of seeing the man who had so thoroughly dismantled my life finally face consequences. But I didn't. Instead, a hollow ache spread through me. The man Janet described, drinking, stealing, forging documents, was a stranger. The Kyle I had married had evaporated somewhere along the way, leaving behind a man I couldn't even recognize. When she left, the silence in my office was deafening. I sat at my desk, the setting sun casting long shadows over the mountains in the distance. My interview was scheduled for 7:00 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 a.m. in Nevada. I should have been reviewing my talking points, preparing for the inevitable questions about Canvas, about its future. But instead, I found myself thinking about Kyle, trying to reconcile the man I had loved with the broken figure who had destroyed everything we'd built. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. The number was unfamiliar, but the Reno area code told me enough. I hesitated before answering. Samantha. Kyle's voice rasped, rougher than I remembered, tinged with a desperation that echoed through the line. Please don't hang up. I stayed silent. I saw the promo for your interview, he continued, his voice shaking. You look really good. I'm happy for you. I said nothing, the weight of his words hanging between us like an unbearable fog. I know. You know about the school. The car, he added, his voice cracking. I messed up, Sam. I messed everything up. Psst. His voice broke on the last word. I've been trying to call you for months, he continued, as if it would make a difference. For over a year, 365 calls. You never answered. I hadn't known. I had blocked his number that night, the night everything had fallen apart. All those messages, all those calls had disappeared into the void, lost in the digital world I'd shut him out of. Say something, please, he begged. I took a slow, steady breath before speaking. What do you want, Kyle? I want to apologize. I want to explain, he said quickly, as if his words could undo everything. I didn't let him finish. I don't need your explanation, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Whatever you did, whatever your reasons were, It doesn't matter anymore. No, I said firmly. You don't get to call me that. You don't get to pretend we're still close. My words were sharp, the truth of them cutting through the distance between us.
You threw me away like I meant nothing. You sold my possessions. You locked me out of my own home.
He whispered something, his voice barely audible. I was desperate. I had gambling debts. I was scared and stupid. And stop! I cut in, my frustration building. I'm not interested in your excuses. You made your choices. Now you're facing the consequences. There was a long silence before he spoke again, his voice hollow, as if the weight of it all had finally hit him. The police want me to turn myself in tomorrow, he said. Then that's what you should do. I closed my eyes, the weight of everything between us, the good days, the bad ones, the life we'd built, and the way it had ended, settling on my chest. Will you be back from New York by then? He asked, his voice laced with the faintest hope. Could we meet, just once? I thought about it for a moment, feeling the tension, the pull of the past, and the weight of what could have been. But then I shook my head, resolute. No, I said, the word falling from my lips like the final nail in a coffin. I don't think that would be helpful for either of us. I ended the call before he could respond, then switched off my phone completely. I had an early flight to catch, and a new future to embrace. Kyle and everything that had come with him belonged to my past now. The next morning, the National Morning Studio was a blur of motion. Production assistants with headsets dashed past, camera operators adjusted equipment, and makeup artists flitted around the hosts and guests in the green room. I sat in the corner, sipping water to calm my nerves, my heart pounding in my chest. 5 minutes, a young woman with a clipboard said, and I nodded, smoothing the sleeves of my blue blazer, the most professional thing in my limited wardrobe. Beneath the jacket, my heart was a drumbeat in my ribs. You are going to be great, the makeup artist assured me, dabbing a final touch of powder onto my face. Just remember to look at Jessica, she added, referring to Jessica Chen, the host of the innovation segment, not the camera. Jessica had a reputation for thoughtful interviews, and I had rehearsed answers 1,000 times in my head. Answers about Canvas, its development, its impact on people. But nothing could have prepared me for her first question after the cameras started rolling. Samantha, Canvas was born from your own experience with loss and transition. Can you tell us about that journey? Jessica's voice cut through the air, smooth and inviting. I froze for a split second. We had rehearsed the details of the program, the mission, the science behind it, but never the personal story. Not for public consumption, at least. Yet, as I looked into her kind eyes, I understood. This wasn't just an interview. It was an opportunity to reach out to others who might be sitting where I had been, hollow and hurting, needing a way forward. I took a steadying breath. 2 years ago, I began, I said, the words flowing as easily as they had in my mind. I came home to find the locks changed on my apartment door. My husband had ended our 15-year marriage via text message, sold my car, and pawned my jewelry. I managed a small smile, aware of the camera now, but speaking directly to Jessica. It felt disorienting, exposing, but in a way, empowering. Her expression remained perfectly balanced, a mixture of empathy and professional interest. How did you move from that moment of crisis to creating Canvas? She asked, her voice soft but insistent. I spoke, sharing my journey, the arts administration program, the fellowship, the late nights spent developing content. As I spoke, I realized how far I'd come from that night in the hallway. Canvas isn't just about processing grief or trauma, I concluded. It's about reclaiming your narrative, finding beauty and meaning Even in the midst of chaos, it's about rebuilding. The interview flew by. We discussed the scientific foundations of art therapy, demonstrated how the program worked, and shared powerful testimonials from users. Before I knew it, Jessica was wrapping up the segment. Canvas is currently available for individual subscribers, but you have bigger plans, correct? I nodded, my heart beating faster now. We're launching an institutional platform next month for hospitals, counseling centers, and schools. We've already partnered with 3 major healthcare networks to offer Canvas to their patients. Impressive growth for a program that began as a personal healing journey, she said, her voice warm. Thank you for sharing your story with us today, Samantha. As the camera stopped rolling, Jessica leaned over. That was fantastic. You're a natural. Back in the green room, I checked my phone. Less than 5 minutes had passed since the segment aired, but my inbox was already flooded. The Canvas website had crashed from the traffic surge. My personal email was filled with interview requests from 3 other news outlets and 14 partnership inquiries from healthcare providers. But then, I saw it. An email from Kyle. The subject line read, "I saw you on TV." My finger hovered over the delete button, the impulse to erase him from my life once again strong. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe the strange pull of the past, made me open it. I'm turning myself into the police this morning. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I truly am sorry. Seeing you succeed is the one bright spot in all of this. You deserve every good thing that's coming your way. Goodbye, Samantha. I stared at the screen, my finger resting lightly on the phone. No response was necessary. I closed the email without a word. Whatever closure Kyle needed, he would have to find it on his own. I had a crashed website to fix, interviews to schedule, and partnerships to evaluate. My life was no longer revolving around the man who had once thought he could discard me. 2 years after that national morning interview, Canvas had become more successful than I ever imagined. We had offices in Reno and San Francisco, a team of 20 employees, and over 1.5 million users worldwide. Our institutional platform was being used in hospitals across the country, and we had recently launched a specialized program for veterans with PTSD. I found myself back in New York, this time to accept an award at the Digital Health Innovation Gala. The event was being held in an elegant hotel ballroom, filled with healthcare executives, tech entrepreneurs, and investors. As I sat at my table, watching the other honorees give their speeches, I felt a strange mix of pride and disbelief. How had the broken woman in that hallway, lost, alone, devastated, transformed into this person, the founder and CEO of a thriving company, about to receive recognition from industry leaders? And now, the host for the Impact Award for Mental Health Innovation goes to Samantha Delaney, creator of Canvas. The applause was deafening. As I made my way to the stage, I could see hundreds of faces looking back at me, including James, my partner of 8 months. He was beaming from our table, his smile a quiet beacon in a room full of strangers. My heart swelled, but I steadied myself. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady and clear. Canvas was born from necessity when my life fell apart. I needed a way to put the pieces back together. I paused, looking out at the audience, feeling the weight of the moment. What I discovered was that creativity isn't just an escape. It's a pathway to healing. As I continued my speech, something caught my eye at the back of the room. A familiar figure stood near the exit, watching intently. Kyle. He looked older, thinner, his once confident posture now slightly hunched, the lines of his face etched with time and regret. He was standing there, as if drawn in by the light, yet I didn't falter. I didn't flinch. I didn't even pause. I had done this. I had rebuilt my life, piece by piece, on my own terms. And no matter how many ghosts from the past appeared, I would not let them take this from me. I didn't acknowledge him. I simply kept speaking about Canvas, about the vision we had for the future, about the millions of lives we hoped to touch. My voice steadied as I continued. In closing, I'd like to share something a user wrote to me recently. Canvas helped me realize that my story didn't end with my loss. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. That, I realized, was what I wanted Canvas to offer everyone who used it. Not just healing, but the chance to rewrite their story, to step out of the darkness and into something they could control. The audience stood, a wave of applause crashing over me, but I didn't focus on it. I kept my gaze forward. From the corner of my eye, I saw Kyle slip out the door, vanishing as quietly as he had appeared, just a fleeting shadow in my rear view. After the ceremony, James and I mingled with the guests. People congratulated me, congratulated Canvas, but I wasn't really there. I was still caught up in the weight of that moment, and then an event coordinator approached me with a message I had been expecting. "Ms. Delaney, there's someone who would like to speak with you privately. He says it's important." I knew who it was before she even described him. "Tell him I'll meet him in the lobby in 5 minutes," I said, my voice controlled, but with a certain finality to it. James looked at me, concern flashing in his eyes. "Everything okay?" "It's fine," I reassured him, forcing a smile. "Just some unfinished business. I won't be long." Kyle was sitting on a bench near the hotel's grand entrance, looking out of place in his worn suit, surrounded by the polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers that reflected everything I had built and left behind. He stood as I approached, the old awkwardness still in his movements, the smile strained, almost as if he was unsure whether I'd even acknowledge his presence. "Congratulations," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "I read about the award in the business section. I hope you don't mind that I came." "How did you get in?" I asked, my tone clipped. "I told them I was with Oak Ridge Health. They're one of your partners, right?" A ghost of his old smile appeared, like a flicker of the man I once knew. "I've been following your success." I felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity, just a profound neutrality, like I was speaking to a stranger who happened to share some of my memories. "I served 14 months, he said, as if the words were heavy. "Got out early for good behavior. I'm working construction now. It's honest work." I nodded, not because I cared about his redemption, but because it didn't matter to me. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, and I meant it. I didn't wish him ill. I just didn't wish him anything at all. "I keep thinking about what I threw away," he continued, his voice quieter now. "Not just our marriage, but the person you were becoming. I could have been part of this." He gestured vaguely toward the ballroom, to the life I had built. I shook my head gently. "No," I said, my voice soft. "You couldn't have." His face registered surprise, followed by a slow understanding. "Canvas, my success, my new life. None of it would have existed if you hadn't locked me out that night." I felt no satisfaction in his realization. It wasn't about that. It was simply the truth. "I should go," I said, turning to leave. "My partner is waiting." "Are you happy?" His voice was barely audible, a whisper of hope, or perhaps regret. I glanced back toward the ballroom, where James was chatting with colleagues, the award gleaming on our table, where my future continued to unfold before me. "Yes," I said, steady and sure. "I am." As I walked away, I heard him call after me, the words hanging in the air like they had no weight anymore. "Samantha." I turned slightly, catching the echo of his voice. You were right, he said. I regret it every day. I nodded once, acknowledging his words without giving them more of me. No response was necessary. Then, I returned to the celebration, to the life I had built from the ground up. A life that was finally, completely my own. Looking back at my journey, from that desperate night in the hallway to becoming the founder of a successful company, I realized something. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about making someone else suffer. It's about living the life they thought they had taken from you. It's about making sure they see exactly what they lost.